She stepped onto the plane with quiet grace, her husband beside her, and two children holding onto their hands with the kind of excitement only kids carry. For first-class tickets in hand, the family moved with a gentle confidence, not flashy, not entitled, just calm, present, and polite. The terminal had been peaceful when they arrived, and nothing about their demeanor suggested that the next few hours would spark a shift that would ripple far beyond the sky. Camille Ashford adjusted her son's collar as they reached the gate. Her husband, Marcus, kept a firm but gentle hold on their daughter's hand. Their children, Ava and Miles, were full of questions about the plane, the clouds, the snacks. They'd never flown in first class before, and Marcus had planned this trip carefully, wanting them to experience something special. They were a family that rarely drew attention, and even now, there was no reason for anyone to think they were anything more than another traveling unit headed toward a destination. Their boarding passes scanned without issue. Camille thanked the attendant, who barely looked up. Once inside the cabin, Ava marveled at the seat that reclined with a button. Miles giggled as his feet swung over the plush carpet. Marcus took the aisle seat next to Miles, while Camille settled between them and Ava. For a brief moment, it felt like they had carved out a little sanctuary above the clouds. And then the shadow fell. A flight attendant approached, lips tight, uniform crisp. Her name badge read Ms. Holbrook. Her tone was clipped. "Excuse me, there seems to be a seating issue." Marcus glanced up, calm but curious. "We booked these 4 seats together. Checked in, no problem." Holbrook tapped on her tablet. "There's been a manifest discrepancy. We need to rebalance seating and accommodate a top-tier elite member. I'll need your wife to relocate to the rear cabin." Camille looked confused. "I'm sorry, these are confirmed, paid seats. Not upgrades. Not points. These are ours." Holbrook's tone sharpened. "Ma'am, I'm not here to argue. Please gather your belongings and move to the back so we may continue boarding." Marcus sat straighter. "Why her?" The flight attendant didn't blink. "Because that's the seat we need. If this continues, I'll have to involve ground crew." The cabin was silent. The businessman nearby paused his paper. A couple 2 rows over exchanged glances. But no one spoke. No one intervened. Camille inhaled slowly, gave her husband a look he understood completely, and leaned over to kiss her daughter. "It's okay, sweetie. I'll just be a few rows away." Ava's hand clung to her sleeve. "Why do you have to go?" "Just for now," Camille whispered. She stood, smoothed her coat, and walked down the aisle without assistance, without protest, and without the courtesy of a second look from the woman who displaced her. The space she left behind felt colder. Miles curled into Marcus's side. "Why did she have to go?" "She didn't do anything." "No," Marcus said softly. "She didn't." He pulled out his phone, tapped a message, sent it. A brief reply came. "What flight number?" Marcus answered. "In economy." Camille's phone buzzed. She read the message. Then another, "Don't worry. Back in first class." The crew moved with robotic efficiency. Ms. Holbrook offered beverages and fluffed pillows, but never looked at Ava or Miles. When she passed Marcus, her face tightened. Miles noticed. "She didn't ask us if we wanted anything." Marcus didn't reply. His hand stayed on his son's shoulder. In the cockpit, Captain Brenner received a flashing alert on his console. Executive attention. High-priority cabin incident. He read it, blinked, looked to his co-pilot. "We've got someone important on board." He picked up the handset. Ms. Holbrook was in the galley pouring club soda when the intercom buzzed. "Ms. Holbrook, report to the cockpit immediately." She entered with a practiced posture. "Yes, Captain." He gestured to the screen. "You removed a passenger this morning. Explain." She blinked. "Yes, sir. I had to relocate a woman who didn't appear to meet first-class criteria." Captain Brenner didn't raise his voice. "Ms. Holbrook, the man in seat 2B is Marcus Ashford. He is the majority stakeholder of this airline's parent group." She turned pale. "You didn't confirm the manifest. You didn't double-check. You just assumed," he said. "I didn't know." "That's the point," the co-pilot said flatly. "You didn't care to." The captain continued. "You'll escort Mrs. Ashford back to her original seat with a public apology. Upon landing, you will be met by HR and security." "Understood." Her lips barely moved. "Yes, sir." She returned to the cabin. But the energy had shifted. Passengers who had looked away now watched. She walked the aisle stiffly, each step heavier than the last. When she reached Camille's row, she spoke low. "Mrs. Ashford, there's been a mistake." Please allow me to escort you back. Camille didn't move. A mistake. Yes, ma'am. A seating error. Camille looked at her seatmates, silent strangers, then back at the flight attendant. Now I'm allowed to sit with my family? Yes, Holbrook said, barely hiding her trembling voice. You didn't ask anyone else to move? Camille said calmly. You didn't even question yourself. There was no reply. Camille stood. I know what first class looks like, and I know what it feels like to be told you don't belong. She walked forward, past staring faces. Ava lit up. Miles sat straighter. Marcus stood and helped his wife into her seat. He said nothing to Holbrook, who hovered for a second too long, then retreated. The cabin was quiet, but not peaceful. It was reflective. The co-pilot's voice buzzed in the flight crew's channel. HR and board liaison are at the gate. Document everything. Back in economy, passengers whispered. Phones buzzed. Screens lit up. Videos of Camille's return were already circulating. In the cockpit, the captain prepared for landing. As the plane descended, Marcus's phone vibrated. Footage trending. Board has reviewed. Keller flagged for immediate action. He didn't react. The silence in their row spoke louder. When the plane landed, no one moved. 2 officers boarded. One stood by the cockpit. Another approached Holbrook. You'll come with us. The board is waiting. She paled. Is this about the officer nodded. The investigation starts now. Passengers sat still, pretending not to listen. When Camille and her family stood to disembark, a junior flight attendant named Lila approached quietly. Would your family like anything? Camille smiled gently. We're fine, thank you. As they exited, an airline official met them near the jet bridge. Mr. Ashford, he began. Keller is in a private debriefing. HR is here. We're issuing a public statement and implementing changes immediately. Make sure it applies to every passenger, Marcus said. Not just the ones with power. He turned to walk, his family beside him. That night, news spread. The footage was everywhere. Headlines varied. Airline owner's wife removed from first class. Bias or blunder. Social media roared. People watched the moment Camille was asked to move, and then watched her return. At home, Marcus read an apology delivered by courier. Mrs. Ashford, I saw you. I didn't question your ticket. I questioned your place. I failed you. Not because I was malicious, but because I let my assumptions lead. You didn't humiliate me. I did that myself. I am sorry. M. Holbrook. Camille read it silently, then wrote one back. M. Holbrook, you're right. It wasn't the first time. Just the first time the world was watching. But if you hold on to the discomfort, maybe it won't be the last time someone speaks up. See Ashford. And as planes flew silently above their city, Camille and Marcus knew this story would echo long after the cabin lights dimmed. Not because it trended, but because it told the truth, quietly and clearly, about who we choose to see and who we don't. In the days that followed, the ripple continued. Camille didn't seek attention. She didn't give interviews or post statements online. She didn't need to. Her silence had already spoken. Her presence had already shifted something in the minds of millions. But what truly surprised her wasn't the public reaction, it was the private one. Letters began arriving. From strangers. From mothers. From teachers. From former flight attendants who said they had witnessed, or even participated in, moments like that and never knew how to change the outcome. Some wrote pages. Others wrote only a sentence or two, but the message was always the same. You made me see it differently. One note stood out. It was from a 12-year-old girl named Serena in rural Michigan. Written in blue ink, on lined notebook paper, it said, Dear Mrs. Ashford, I watched your story on my grandma's phone. You didn't yell, and you didn't fight. But you looked like you were strong anyway. My mom said you made everyone listen just by sitting still. I want to be like that when I grow up. Not because you were treated badly, but because you showed me how to hold my head high even when people are wrong. Camille folded the letter and placed it with the others in a small wooden keepsake box she had started, not for validation, but for remembrance. She wanted her children to read them someday, to know that a moment that hurt had planted 1,000 seeds. Marcus, too, changed. He was always thoughtful, always focused. But now he became more than a figurehead. At board meetings, he pressed harder, not just on policies, but on culture. He asked for transparency reports not only by department, but by name. How many passengers were relocated? Who were they? What did they look like? What patterns emerged? And why hadn't they noticed sooner? He didn't speak as a victim. He spoke as a father, a husband, a man whose family had become a mirror for an entire industry. And when he spoke, the room listened. Back home, life resumed on the surface. Ava went back to school, where her teacher quietly gave her space to talk about the flight if she ever wanted to. She didn't yet, but she had written about it in her journal. Not in anger, but in questions. Why didn't anyone say something? Why did Mom look brave even when she looked sad? Will someone ever treat me like that? Camille saw the entries when she helped her with homework one evening. She didn't cry. She just placed her hand over Ava's and said, "Those are questions worth asking. And I promise you, you'll never have to answer them alone." Miles, younger and still processing, had started pretending to be Captain Miles at home, creating flight scenarios with fairness rules written in crayon. Everyone sits where their ticket says. No one gets moved without asking nicely. Mom, stay close. They framed his rules on the fridge. One weekend, the Ashfords were invited to a quiet dinner hosted by another family in their neighborhood, new friends, who had watched what happened and wanted to say thank you, not with applause, but with listening ears. Over a simple meal, the conversation turned to what it meant to really belong. An older woman at the table said softly, "It's strange, isn't it? How often we're told to act like we belong instead of being treated like we do." Camille nodded. "That's why I didn't raise my voice," she replied. "Because for people like me, the cost of being loud is always higher than the silence." But the world saw the silence for what it was, dignity. And that changed everything. A few weeks later, the airline released its first internal audit on in-flight bias cases. For the first time, the report wasn't buried in legalese or hidden behind PR language. It was open, public, and direct. The CEO made a statement. Flight 407 was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom. We are not proud of that, but we are committed to healing what allowed it. The final paragraph was different from any corporate statement Camille had ever read. "We thank the Ashford family not for their patience, but for their integrity. Their quiet resistance called us forward. We will not forget." And they didn't. 6 months later, Camille was invited, not to a news studio, but to speak privately at a leadership training seminar for all new cabin crew hires. The room was small. No press. No spotlights. Just rows of uniforms and eyes waiting to learn. She stood at the front, hands clasped, and said, "You'll be trained to check for turbulence, to follow protocols, to manage emergencies. But no manual will ever teach you to see people clearly. That's your work. And it matters every single flight." When she finished, no one clapped. They just sat in stillness, letting it settle. That night, Camille returned home, walked upstairs to find Ava asleep with her journal open and Miles curled up under his blanket, still clutching a toy airplane. Marcus stood at the doorway and said, "They're going to grow up in a world that remembers what you did." Camille turned off the light. "No, they'll grow up in a world that remembers what we didn't let go." And outside, above the city, another plane passed through the sky, quiet, steady, unshaken. And somewhere inside, someone just like her sat with a boarding pass in hand and a seat they had every right to keep. This time, no one questioned it. And if they did, someone would speak, or sit, or stay. But no one would ever pretend it didn't matter again.